Hey, everybody. I'm Dean Takahashi, the editorial director at GamesBeat. Welcome to GB Live, an event brought to you by Xsolla. We're here to talk about navigating Google's new guidelines with lessons learned from iOS. And I'm here with Sam Gaglani, Executive Vice President of Business Development at Xsolla. And he's been following the Google and Apple news very closely and is here to talk to us about the road to openness. So welcome, Sam. First, maybe we need to catch up on the antitrust litigation facing Apple and Google that brought us to this discussion. We'll be talking more about this subject at the GamesBeat next on November 12th and 13th in San Francisco. But Sam, first, please say a bit more about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Dean, and thanks for having me. I'm Sam Gaglani. I'm the EVP of Global Business Development at Xsolla. I've been at the company 14 years, in the games industry since 2003, ex-Activision, Blizzard, Nexon, and Pandemic Studios alumni, and happy to talk about what's been going on. And there's a lot going on.
Well, get us started also with what's happening today, as well as what's been happening across this whole case.
Yeah, so today was, a hot news day. Today, Google decided to petition the Supreme Court. And at the same time, they have updated their dev portal to say that they will allow third-party payment options. They will allow in-app messaging and steering of users to a D2C experience, essentially doing what Apple is now having studios and developers do in the iOS environment in the United States. However, Google left a nice little dangling line at the very end of that update, which said these are subject to change, and these could, essentially they can't verify the trust and safety of what these D2C experiences could provide. I should also note you also can download an app outside of Play, and that app could include third-party payment option SDKs. All of that being said, Google has, like I said, created this little disclaimer like, hey, you can do it now, but in a couple of weeks or maybe a couple of months, that all could change.
And I guess if there's some do's and don'ts for developers out of this, what is Google sort of allowing or not allowing?
Yeah, so if I'm a developer and I'm thinking about, changing my app in the United States for an Android device in presenting some sort of direct-to-consumer experience, you could allow a buy button in-app and have it side by side with what you're seeing right now. You could have a banner ad that would redirect to a D2C store, it's like a mobile or Chrome environment. You can present in-app messaging to the user to steer them to a D2C experience. That being said, because of this disclaimer Google has put up there, and I'm going to now get in a little bit of best practices, you may not want to go down the road of a buy button because that does require a little tech debt, that does require dev work. And if Google does change those guidelines over the few weeks, what I mean by changing guidelines, they might and most likely will add a 23% commission on something like that. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer, so take my advice as you want. But if they do that, then you would have to remove that buy button from the in-app. A banner ad and in-app message, that's much easier to remove, and it's also a lot easier to surface. So if I was going to, give some sort of consultative advice to devs and studios, that's what I would say.
So it reminded me a little bit to beware of, I guess, what Apple had done before as well.
Exactly.
Yeah, that does bring up the question though, like what are some of those lessons everybody has learned or developers have learned from the iOS, I guess, compliance experience?
Yeah, so Apple. So I do want to say something. So Apple and Google are in different cycles or journeys with the court systems in the United States. We all know what Apple did. They were blatantly disregarding the District Appeals Court ruling. They were found in contempt of court. And that last ruling that came down from the appeals court was essentially like, you need to do this. You need to do it now. There's no more second chances. Google, I would say, is about a year and a half from getting to where Apple was at that point. Google is at the point of, okay, we hear what you're saying, Court. We're now going to allow it and come up with guidance, is what they're calling it, or guidelines. What we suspect will happen is those guidelines and guidances will essentially tack on a 23% or some sort of percent per transaction. So going back to the do's and don'ts and best practices of what you would do in iOS, that is allowing you to do a buy button in-app. So you're in the app, you're in the store, you would see your normal buy button, and then right next to that, you would see another buy button that would say buy through, Dean's store for 20% more value. And that could surface a UI. It would look like an iOS checkout, but it's really a redirect of a browser, because that's the guideline. And there you could immediately make a payment. We would recommend doing that for an impulse buy. An impulse buy, if you're a social casino game, here's an example of that. That is, you've run out of spins and you want to buy some more spins right away. Or you're in game, and let's say in a first-person shooter, and you die and you need to respawn very quickly. Those are impulse buys. And the reason we would recommend that is because the user is immediately going to want to get back into the game and buy something for better value. We don't recommend showing that all the time. We recommend at some point showing a banner ad or a redirect or steering mechanism to a D2C experience. So that's now redirecting you out of the app. Usually it's in a mobile Safari browser, and there you're presented with a nice portal, a store, I should say, and experience. And there you're seeing a loyalty program, a reward program, an offer chain program. You're gamifying that purchase experience. And the reason you're doing that is because you want that player to continually coming back to that experience to buy more stuff. And then in the app, they're just playing the game. So there's two ways to position it, and two ways that you can A/B test it.
Are the players who are still going through this process, are they still getting what Tim Sweeney had called the scare screens, or
not anymore? No. So that was something that the court said you can no longer do. But we suspect Google will 100% do that because because remember, they're in different parts of that journey. They haven't actually done that yet. And now, and I think that's what that disclaimer was today, when they said we can't verify the trust and safety of what you do. That will be the next step, the scare screen. And then that'll get litigated again through the appeals court, and then it'll go through a new cycle, which is part of their plan, right? However, I think, in my opinion, Google's very clever. They're very smart. They're going to use a lot of data and analysis and come up with ways to really skirt those compliance guidelines as much as they can in a way that won't cause the same sort of heat that Apple got.
Yeah, I think they can just look over at Apple and get some lessons, and also see what did work, which is delaying tactics. Right? You lose a lot of time going through this process. And it's like, we could just say, do what Apple did, even though we know they got slapped down. We'll wait to get slapped down before we concede this point, right? Yeah.
I mean, it is, you're absolutely right. It's delay. They might even argue, well, some of the, we're different than Apple. You can't treat us the same way. I could see an argument of that sort. Yes, we make a phone and we have a marketplace, but we're all these other things that Apple isn't. So that's where I think that could go, for sure. But I would say high level. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, interrupt you.
Oh, I was going to say, do you have some more lessons here on the iOS part, or do we want to move on to the next?
I think the other lesson is, as you start to, map out what this D2C, journey is for your app or for your game, you have to think about, some metrics, and you have to think about how you're presenting it to the user. And I would say number one lesson, number one thing I've learned, and what we have seen all studios learn the hard way, is value. And people do this all the time because they're afraid to give too much value because they want to make more money. You have to present a value proposition that is so enticing, because you're not creating new friction to the user journey. So you have to provide significant value for that first time purchase, so that when they get into the funnel, that purchase is beautiful. They're getting something of value so that they return back to that store. And what do I mean by that? It could be free item, right? Free. Everyone loves free. So free is good. And that means you get to that store, you get the free item if you save your payment method or if you register an account there. And that gets you loyalty points or web currency points. That is super important. And then on the other side of it, it's also engaging that user in the D2C experience with some sort of loyalty program. And what we're talking about here is classic e-retail e-commerce mechanisms and tactics that are not new, but it's new for this industry because everyone's always been on iOS and been relying on that. So we're now teaching these companies how to do that, even though this stuff has been around for a long time. Like you and I know this because you go to Zappos.com and you're getting loyalty points or whatever it could be. We're now seeing this being repeated in this space.
Yeah, it's interesting that surveys seem to have shown that the players are catching on, and they're catching on quickly. That like, if you go to a web shop, you're going to get better deals, or you're going to get more bang for your buck.
So you're right. And players are also very savvy. They're not dumb. They're reading the news. They know what's going on. They know that if you're redirecting them, that you're no longer having to pay Apple or Google, and let's say today, 30%, that you're getting a much better margin. So the expectation from these players is, yeah, I better see something of better value because I know you're going to be making more money. And if you don't do that, there could be blowback. Now, when I talk about that, I mean, you're seeing this in more of the core hardcore games. I wouldn't say casual audiences know this, but core game players and mid-core players, core game players definitely know this. They're definitely seeing it. And the thing is, they talk to each other in Discord or any community forum, and they're sharing information. They're like, I saw the store present me this. Well, I'm seeing the store present me something else because of personalization. So players are super savvy. Never ignore player sentiment. That's a big takeaway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if we get to practical guidance for developers, then what are some things you'd like to point out?
Not one size fit all. Don't do it all the time at the same time, and be measured in your approach. So what I mean by one size doesn't fit all, your game could be casual or your game could be core. That doesn't mean you can, roll out the same mechanisms. Casual audiences are going to be really wary of entering a D2C environment. That audience is either a minor or a demographic that skews much older and they're not used to having to re-enter a credit card and they become very scared. So a buy button is a good choice because it's so seamless and easy to do. When it comes to adding value, that's something you really need to think about because it could mess around with your game economy. Think about you're now introducing more virtual items or virtual coins into an economy. So you have to be really careful how you measure that out. And then do tons of A/B testing and do it in small cohorts. Don't roll this out to everyone at once. That is a big mistake. I think what you should do is take a cohort of, let's say, 100 whales, let's say, and expose the store to them and see how they react. And then if that's really meaningful and you see a good ROI, you expose it to another cohort. And there you can start playing around with exposing the buy button, doing in-app messaging, doing a banner that redirects to a store. These are all things that, as you start to think about how you want to present these experiences to your users, you should be doing versus just, throwing it all out there, because that sometimes can backfire in your face. And users might start to see different store experiences and wonder why they're not getting the same deal as somebody else. So it's a measured approach. It's being really careful on how you present those offers and the value you're providing, and then A/B testing and using data to make informed decisions.
It's interesting. So there's a hybrid strategy here for developers. Is there also something of a contingency planning that they have to do, given how much back and forth is still yet to happen on the Google side?
So for Apple, I think right now you're pretty safe, right? Pending some sort of, the Supreme Court did decline to hear Apple's case. That doesn't mean it's going to go away. Apple's clever. They've got really smart lawyers. They're going to keep arguing. I think they just argued again last week. For Google, I would say, cautionary approach, because you don't know right now what Google is going to do in the next several weeks. However, if you're, on the smaller size or mid-size studio level, immediately surfacing an in-app message can't hurt, because you can now redirect them in-app to a store. And that app message can be removed pretty quickly. If you want to add a banner to your store, that does take a little work, but not a lot. You can remove that pretty quickly. I would definitely caution against any sort of buy button mechanism right now, until we understand what Google is going to do when it comes to how they're going to, basically what I call penalize those kind of transactions with a commission or some sort of scheme that they're going to come up with. So I think today, caution, but cautious optimism.
And maybe our last topic here might be like, what is going to happen in the rest of the world? Like,
so great question. And what we're seeing is this, I wouldn't call it a tidal wave, but a slow movement of openness. Obviously, we have Tim Sweeney and Epic to thank. They're all about optionality. They're all about freedom. They're about leveling the playing field, which is exactly what Xsolla does. We're all about democratizing the games industry and giving everyone equal access to something. So I think right now what we're seeing is in the EU, you have the DMA. Apple did push back and you're not seeing what you're seeing in the US, but it's a little bit of a change. I think the DMA and the EU Commission is going to take a harder look at what Apple did, and we might see more changes there. Also, you're going to see changes in Japan for sure, South Korea, Brazil, of all places. I think they're being really aggressive in that. And I think as you start to, see these countries adopt more aggressive stances towards these, what I call gatekeepers, now is a time, if there was ever a time, if you're a studio owner, or a developer, or a publisher, and if you don't have a D2C store stood up, or if you don't even have an agreement with a vendor that can provide you with that experience, or if you haven't started thinking about how you're going to internally build that yourself, I would say now is the time to at least get that in place, because you need to be wary of like what's going to happen in the next year or so in different parts of the world. It's not going backwards. If anything, it's moving in the right direction. And we have seen a lot of people be very reticent to adopt, and now we're seeing a big push to, okay, yes, we're gonna go that route.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's Sam Gaglani, EVP of Business Development at Xsolla. That's a great download on the market situation now. You can learn more about this topic at the GamesBeat Next on November 12th and 13th in San Francisco. And thank you for listening, everybody.
Thanks a lot, Dean. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.